a very deep investment in being like what I call terminally unique, which means that I'm like so different from everybody else. And the shadow of that is that it's like extremely lonely. There is a now normative, I would say, conditional access to love and security and approval that most of us grew up with. And that required that we strategize and curate the aspects of ourselves and our behavior that would secure approval and attention. And we start to study as kids the aspects of ourselves that would result in withdrawal of love or punishment. This curation becomes our personality, bringing awareness to the reasons that we might actually want to not have the things that we don't have. Like, what are we getting out of that? What might be the upside? When you're in a community of women where there's like, it's no shame, it's just interesting, you just bring it out into the open air much more quickly.
That level of introspection can be hard sometimes because, we may not have that ability to really understand what's going on within us because we're so close to it. Hello, everyone. I'm excited to announce the upcoming launch of my new book titled The Nomadic Soul, a seeker's guide to finding a sense of self and belonging in the modern world, which highlights a profound yet often unexplored part of your identity that holds the key to everything from answering your biggest questions to finding deeper meaning and joy in everyday life. Visit thenomadicsoulbook.com to learn more, download a free chapter, or to buy a copy. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dreamcatcher podcast, a place where your dreams can find a voice. I'm your host, Celine Chenoy. Thank you to all of you who return every week to tune in to become a better version of yourself. Make sure you hit subscribe if you haven't already, and rate our show if you enjoy this episode. When a woman feels alive and in her power, she can be the most powerful force on this plane. But according to my guest, Kelly Brogan, women have been duped by the messages they have received from society. They have abandoned their true nature in exchange for seeming empowerment. Kelly is here to guide us on a path that helps us stop creating struggle and create a sense of true safety to finally experience the specific pleasure of who we are. Kelly Brogan, MD, is a holistic psychiatrist, author of the New York Times bestselling book, A Mind of Your Own, the children's book, A Time for Rain, and co-editor of the landmark textbook, Integrative Therapies for Depression. She is the founder of the online healing program, Vital Mind Reset, and the membership community of Vital Life Project. She specializes in a root cause resolution approach to psychiatric syndromes and symptoms. During this interview, Kelly will share a provocative perspective on feminine reclamation, including the imperative to learn the skills of self-safety to embody creative expression. She'll provide actionable steps to help you claim the jewels from the cave of your shame, own your badness, and align with your desires. Hi, Kelly. How are you doing today?
I am excited to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you on the show. I really enjoyed reading your book, The Reclaimed Woman. I mean, it's so beautifully written. And I have to say that it really got me thinking about all the messages that I received as a young girl growing up in a culture which had very fixed ideas on femininity and what it means to be a woman and how a woman should behave in society. So I want to start out by thanking you for opening our eyes to these really important issues and becoming aware, making us aware of all the external forces around us that we probably would not have been aware of.
I appreciate that because, they say you teach what you need to learn. And this book is a summary of the many, many challenging lessons that I have at least begun to alchemize over the past several years and waking up to the ways that we have participated in our own self-betrayal, violation, in our own oppression, even. It's kind of like coming out of anesthesia, like mid-operation. I mean, it's not easy, and I know from experience that it's worth it because as we grow this field of women who are remembering, what it is to be a woman in our natural essence and how that looks very different than what we've been taught and told and in many ways programmed to believe, it will become easier and easier for, our daughters and our friends and our sisters to follow suit.
How do you think your book is different from the other books that have been written on female empowerment? Because there are quite a few being written these days, but what do you think it makes yours stand out, like in terms of the things you found out, and your own viewpoints?
Yeah, thank you. I love that question because I I have a very deep investment in being like what I call terminally unique, which means that I'm like so different from everybody else. And the shadow of that is that it's like extremely lonely. So I would love to like share my perspective and also invite any of your listeners or anyone who gets this. It appears that you resonate. Yeah, to grow this field together because it does feel like the only book written this way. And here's what I mean by this way. I started my reclamation journey in the health space. So what does that mean? It means that I started to look at, in my own experience and in the experience of my patients, how I was participating in my own disempowerment and my own chronic struggle, right? So whether that was because I looked down the barrel of an autoimmune condition diagnosis back in 2010. And I considered the possibility of taking a medication for the rest of my life and identifying with the label of being, a sick patient who needs medical care for good. Or because I was a very ready prescriber to pregnant and breastfeeding women as one of the first so-called reproductive psychiatrists, which means that I believed that something was fundamentally wrong. Like it went awry, and we're all fragile and delicate, and some of us are born with the wrong genes and things just happen. And thank God, there's medicine to help us manage this because otherwise it would be really bad, right? So what is underneath that experience of being saved by the system from ourselves, triangulation, right? So that victim triangle that is comprised of the villain, rescuer, and the victim, it is the triangulation against, right, your body. You are recruiting the system to get help with the badness and wrongness of you. And never is that more poignant than in psychiatry, because it's like not your pancreas, it's not your liver or your heart. It's you, actually. It's your behavior, it's your cognition, it's your emotions, your experience of the world that is a danger to you or to the people around you. And as I began to explore how to shift the power internally, and to take what often is a scary and uncomfortable level of personal responsibility for the experience of, the symptoms so that you can actually get on your own team, right? And experience the symptoms as messages from you to you about you. I saw that there were all sorts of needs that were being met, by this dynamic with the system that would now require a more adult relationship to those needs. And I'll give a quick example, right? So if I am, like, let's say my daughter needs a ride somewhere and I don't feel like driving her because I'm in the middle of something, or I'm just like feeling tired and lazy, or maybe I've been driving all day or whatever. If I have a headache, then I can say, wow, you know what? I have this migraine. It's really intense. Can somebody else pick you up? I just can't. right? And in that version of the experience, I get her potentially compassion, I get her understanding, and I get to say no without actually owning that I'm saying no. I might not even know that I don't want to do that, right? I'm only relating through this boundary that's been semi or subconsciously produced, that is called my symptom, right? But if I am well, right, then I am in a position to say, I really, I don't want to drive you. And what that requires is that I be okay with being seen as bad and wrong, right, by somebody that matters to me, and that I align with my inner no, with an outer no. So I get coherent and consistent. And this, I've learned, requires actually like a nervous system integrity, right? To be able to hold all of what comes up with this simple stuff, this mundane dynamics in our relationships. It requires an integration and a healing of the nervous system that is actually quite like physical to start with. So the protocol that I, worked with in the health space is a lifestyle protocol, right? It's detox, it's changing your diet, and it's working with daily contemplative practice. And that's where I come from. So I understand the role of victim consciousness when it comes to health and the nuances around why it is that health actually is always a reflection of what we need it to be at the moment. And you can shift it, but it requires a ritual, I think, a ritual initiation to the reclamation of your power and the seat that you are ready to occupy in your adult, space. So I began to translate that, because I had resolved my Hashimoto's like 15 years ago, and it was kind of, I don't know, wasn't even that interesting to me anymore. And I still saw these patterns of resentment and disappointment. I struggled in my romantic relationships, and I struggled in some ways with my mothering and dynamics that I was seeing recurring. And usually the struggle would come under the banner of, I have to get this person to see my perspective. Right? Like I know better than everybody. And I just get it, right? Like I see it, I get it. I'm just going to get them to see, and then I will be safe in the world. Then everything will be okay. So I was living, as so many women do, in this state of chasing other people's perspectives, orientation, and opinions, and trying to organize them on the outside so that I could feel okay, even though my body was physically well, right? Yeah. Trajectory, it turns out, is like a very classic of maturation, where you really create the foundation physically to hold a lot of the unwanted, seemingly quote unquote negative emotions that come up as you start to align the rest of your relationships and the rest of your life choices with what is actually true for you. So that process brought me into the realm of understanding the role of shame specifically, and the amount of vital force energy, right? So you can do all the health hacking things, and you can absolutely resolve, I believe, any diagnosis. Actually, I have proof of a lot of that, as does my mentor, Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez. And you can still feel like you're not sure life is worth living, right? You can still feel like you're an outsider looking in. You can still feel like you're just waking up to manage your to-do lists, and your relationships are not nurturing you. They're not filling you up. Then what, right?
Where does that come from, Kelly? That feeling of just not feeling good enough, or just not being able to meet your needs. Where does that come from?
Yeah. So there is a now normative, I would say, conditional access to love and security and approval that most of us grew up with. And that required that we strategize, right? And curate the aspects of ourselves and our behavior that would secure approval and attention. And we start to study as kids the aspects of ourselves that would result in withdrawal of love or punishment. And this curation becomes our personality. I think there are nuances that are relevant, post waves of feminism that include the fact that so many of us were raised with our mothers out of the home. In the first 3 years when we are establishing our primary attachment pattern. So now, we're several generations of adults who have tremendous attachment issues, who don't know how to recognize the potential for secure attachment in a partner, who don't know how to hold their own emotional experience and visit with curiosity others. And, knowing the roots of this is interesting, it's not totally necessary. So, I don't think everybody has to like go digging into their past memories
but
and
that's
find.
what we typically do. We go for a session with a psychiatrist or the psychologist.
Right.
We go back to the past when you're an infant. What happened with your parents? They ask you all those questions and they go way deep into.
And I think it's, it's compelling because it's your story, right? It's your story.
Right.
And I've learned through the modality that I'm most passionate about, I would say, which is called family constellation, that, okay, great. That however you
we
can
had a
get
guest on the show who was an expert on it. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. I would love to listen to that. Yeah, I'm like a zealot about it because I've watched it, change my life and the lives of many others. And it's kind of a mysterious modality, but there are a lot of tenets. And one of them is the imperative to say yes to your experience, past, present, and future. And to start with a yes, right? Like, yes, this occurred. Yes, this occurred. And how do I orient towards the life in front of me, choose my actual life rather than compensating for dynamics, not only in my own past, but actually in my ancestry and these so-called loyalties that we have to repeat or do good, by our ancestors by making sure, right? Like, let's say you have a lot of women in your mother line who have had struggles trusting men. You may say, you know what, it ends with me. I'm just going to focus on my career and I'm not even going to mess with them. Forget it. And that's a compensation, right? Or you could just repeat the same cycles. And a lot of times if you find yourself in these patterns and you've like done everything possible to work on it and somehow it just keeps recurring, this maybe that you're holding that you don't even know that you're holding. So, in summary, what I find I have a seemingly unique purview around the role of victim consciousness, not only in our relationship to our bodies and how that shows up in our propensity to engage pharmaceuticals, to engage the medical system, to look outside of ourselves for what it is that's happening within, but also, how we can reclaim that power in our relationships, right? So as mothers, as, partners, wives, and in our communities, in our relationship to our work. And these two spaces, I find like in the health reclamation space, not a lot of people want to talk about sexuality. Not a lot of people want to talk about the nuances of feminine creativity and play and expression. And in the feminine embodiment spaces, there's a huge blind spot when it comes to the potential that we have as women to work with our own experience of health and so-called illness from a truly empowered place. And I also, again, have I've played a lot of different parts. Like I've worn a lot of different costumes. So like I've been, on this side of the prescribing aisle, and I moved for 10 years in my practice to the other side of deprescribing. And I've, been the controlling, micromanaging wife. And now I understand that we have so much more power as women to change the course of our romantic relationships than I ever would have been ready to hear at the time. I've been the know-it-all holistic.
What caused that shift?
Being divorced twice, and dedicating myself to the forensics of, why it would be that, this partnership, this experience of companionship is such a priority to me. And yet it seemed to disappoint, right? So I find disappointment to be one of the most powerful portals, along with resentment, for discovering the stories that are really echoing in the chamber of my own body and heart. And exploring those stories has led me to identify a lot of the inner conflicts that drove these patterns of struggle, you know? And so, because I've just always believed this since I was a little girl, that women are amazing, right? That we are extraordinary in ways that I could never even fully wrap my mind around. And it's not because I can do what he can do bleeding, right? There's something else. Because I believe that, it was actually like just a little bit of an uncomfortable moment for me to access the work of folks like Laura Doyle or one of my coaches, Omrapani, and to really hear them when they say, when a woman gets in her lane, when a woman resolves her fear-based reflexes to micromanage, direct, and control, she can change everything about the relationship. No couples therapy, he doesn't have to read a book. He doesn't have to go on a retreat. No, nothing. That ultimately is coherent with my belief system, which is that we do have that power. Like, we actually have always had that power, and we don't need anyone else to get on board. Right? I don't need my kids to get on board in order for me to become the kind of mother I long to be. Right? The experience of feeling that you have failed as a mother is one of the most devastating, shame-fueled, self-perceptive handicaps there is. So how is it that we can actually take full responsibility and not need our kids to get or change a damn thing, right? And that is true for, I think, every dimension of your life. So, really translocating that power internally, there is an uncomfortable moment where you still want to say, no, but he needs to get this, or no, but he needs to show up, or he's not doing the work, or yeah, but my kids are disrespectful, and yeah, but their dad needs to chime in more, or whatever. And all of the ways that we finger point and blame, it feels validating, and it feels good, and even, I would say, enlivening, right?
Yeah.
So to choose different ways to enliven our bodies is also the crossroads you get to, where you're like, okay, there's got to be a better way, to experience life. I didn't come here
Yeah,
for
and that's a
for
journey, right? That's a journey, Kelly. Like, I mean, transmuting all that shame and that guilt and managing our triggers, like that is a journey. I mean, I definitely speak for myself when I say that, I still need to watch out, like, for when my uh, my subconscious mind like takes over and I have a knee-jerk reaction, or I think I have unsavory thoughts about someone. So I think it's all about self-management, right? And what are some of the tools that you generally prescribe to women if they are trying to get to that place of empowerment and becoming someone who can give themselves the permission to just be themselves?
Yeah. So I would say that I'm not sure the goal is to not have unsavory thoughts about another person. And I'm not sure the goal is to never do the shitty thing, right? And to always move with grace and self-possession. I don't know. I'm midlife. I've come to believe that our triggers are our triggers, right? Our pattern in our nervous system is kind of what we're working with. It's a part of the storyline that we have opted into. So I don't have goals of like transcending my maladaptive ways. I suppose my primary goal is to insert time, space, and awareness into the moment that I would otherwise unconsciously and reflexively engage in old habit, right? So that I can get the triggering email that I would normally reply to immediately with, like, my chest pounding and like tightness in my throat and like needing to make sure my perspective was like on the record. And these days, I might still do that, right? But if I do it, there's going to be a part that once you awaken this part, I don't think it ever goes to sleep again. That is watching me do that, right? And more likely with practice, there will be a few moments where I might remember this one tool and where I might recognize I have a choice to choose playfulness instead of punishment, right? Because we punish from the victim posture. We perpetrate as villains from the victim. So that punishment chain, it's like, I feel wronged, I punish. She or he feels wrong, they punish me back, then I punish them back, right? So it's this chain reaction. The exit from that is to prioritize your energy so that you're unwilling to donate it to this kind of a cause that you're fundamentally rejecting anyway. You're saying like, you suck, you're wrong. And then you're literally dishing your vital force energy over to that person in the form of, I'm going to get you to see kind of communication. So you prioritize your energy and you start to value actual playfulness and maybe even creativity and pleasure over the validation of how it is that you were wronged, right? So being right about how wronged you've been. And it's just a little moment where you're like, like what would the playful version of Kelly do? She wouldn't write that email. She's got other more interesting things going on, right? So you focus on creating rather than fixing what's wrong in reality. And your whole nervous system starts to shift. It's a different posture. It's a regenerative posture rather than a stress physiologic posture. So I mentioned the one tool. I like to think of it as being like the only spiritual tool anybody ever needs on this path. And I call it entering through the upset. And there's really not much to it because it's mostly a prioritization of how it is that you feel without compromise. So when you make this meta commitment to yourself as a woman, you pattern disrupt all of these generations we were talking about of programming that say what you do and how you do it is actually the mark of your worth as a woman. And in prioritizing how it is that you feel, you show up to yourself. I call it self-husbanding, but
I like that term.
Devotional. Yeah, it's just sort of like, fun, but it works for me really well because I'll explain, sort of what the practice is. But when you show up to yourself with this devotional energy, you bring your attention and your presence, you bring your yes. It's a life change. It's like a record scratch on the song because our defensive structure does not allow us to do that, right? So if I get the email and I have a practice of entering through the upset, then I would feel, and I don't like this, however that looks for you. I call it upset, but I don't like this energies going on in my mind and body. And I would stop literally everything I'm doing. If there's people around, I would go in the bathroom. And I like time containers. They're very important for me, not only to commit to something, but also to feel that it is accessible. So I would set a 90-second timer and I would literally just sit somewhere and track with my attention everything that is happening in my body. Now, before I do that, I would invoke this. For you, it might be a benevolent father. It's your inner masculine. I would invoke this energy. For me, it's like, that devoted husband who's like, I'm here for you, baby. What you got? Right? Like, and all he's saying is, I see that. I see that. I see that. That's it. There's no story. There's no like, oh, I feel grief in my stomach. I feel, this memory from my child. It can be that, but that's not the intention. The intention is literally marrying your sensation with your awareness. And I like to do it through this sort of like couple, inside of you. So you invoke that and then you track. I see that. I see that. I see that. That's it. And you'll find that in 90 seconds, there will be an energetic transmutation. Your chest might start out racing and really tight, and you might end up with tingles in your belly, and it might disperse into sort of like a pixelated feeling throughout your arms. And within 90 seconds, I can virtually guarantee that it will evolve. It's the nature of energy, right? It is the nature of these sensations to evolve. But as kids, we don't learn that arc, right? Because we're told to stop crying, calm down. We're gaslit, and told we're okay when we're clearly not. And we don't learn that even, these terrifyingly huge emotions have an arc, and you can cry like you feel your guts are going to spill out, and then within a few minutes you could be laughing. Right? So in that 90-second container, you have done already the work of, this self-reunion, of this commitment to the self, so that you're not as likely to engage in what actually is a self-betrayal that is represented by thinking that you need to go get somebody else to see something, communicate with them, send the text, send the voice note, send the email, call them on the phone, and that you need to make sure that your perspective is understood in order for you to feel safe in the world. You're less likely to do that because you recognize that that would mean you'd have to leave what's going on in here. And suddenly that feels kind of cruel, right? It's like if there's a little girl crying, you're not going to be like, hey, I'll be back. I'm going to go sort this and leave her alone in the room. So it's restoring that allegiance. And if you just prioritize that, literally small upsets to big upsets, a shift will begin to happen in your meta perspective about what is unfolding in your life.
I love that. But what is the significance of having that masculine kind of voice in your mind? Why is that important in your process?
Yeah. So I have learned from, obviously, folks like Jung and others who speak about this inner animus and inner anima, right? These signature energies inside. I also am a huge fan of David Deda's work, if you know his work. And, he talks about, as do many, the masculine energy of consciousness and the feminine energy of love or light. And there are many ways to sort of like feel into your flavors of those two, resonant fields within your own body. I have had conversations with colleagues where, they question whether calling this an inner masculine is problematic, because I have no idea what a man's body feels like because I'm not in one, right? So to call it that is so how would I recognize that if I don't even know, what that actually is? It's more an invocation of the polarity, right? This yin yang concept that I have one energy inside of me that is attuned to action, and that its gift inside of me is my attention, right? So that is the witness. And I have this other, it's just the seeming chaos of movement and all of the unpredictable and seemingly, disordered, feelings and sensations that are arising. Okay? And we are trained, obviously, to believe that we will be respected if we use our heads, and that we will lose that respect if we follow our hearts and lead with our hearts. So there is a maturation of that concept that says you are the one who has to respect and honor your heart first, right? We're not going out there dumping our feeling states on everybody else and expecting them to honor them. That's not the idea. It's showing up in this sacred marriage, in this sacred union inside, so that I actually start to give myself the attention and presence that I longed for, that I believe actually confers safety to your system. So like in my health protocol, Vital Mind Reset, what I find is it's like a masculine initiation, because you show up and you finally give that much of a shit about yourself that you're going to actually pay attention to what time you're waking up in the morning, what you're doing first thing, what you're thinking about, what you're eating, what you're drinking. And you
adding
are
structure and routine.
Exactly.
To your self-care practice.
Yeah. And it's, my approach to that is very, It's like the gaze of a loving father, right? But you're offering it to yourself. And that energy it really is an expectation that you will succeed and you will do it. So do it. Right. It's not this more nurturing, compassionate kind of, yeah, try, give it your best. It's not that. Right. So there's a way
Got
that we
it.
show
Yeah.
up for ourselves that translates and transmits an energy of somebody's home, like daddy's here, I don't know. And we can do that for ourselves. And only then can we, really begin to instill the safety that allows our more challenging emotions like shame a space to exist and transmute themselves. You don't have to fix or heal your emotions. And by extension, you don't have to learn how to be a woman. And I do believe it is really incumbent upon us to learn how to offer ourselves the safety that we imagine should come from the outside, because it's a losing game. It really is, to
Right.
demand that anyone, any system, and I speak also as like a career activist who spent many years demanding of the system that something else occur so that we would feel okay. And I finally recognized it's not what maturity or sovereignty looks like, right? It looks like generating that okayness within so that you can make choices with sober eyes, so that you can start to see more clearly and identify the power that you have to navigate in alignment with your own preferences, which, even if it's just how you're telling the story about what is happening, that power always, no one can take that away. It always exists. It's a permanent feature of our embodiment.
And you also write about the importance of community and having a community of women who can support us and really help us bring that side of us that you talk about, and I would love for you to tell us more about that and why you think it's important.
Yeah. So again, the health journey, I have learned, can be a solo path. Right. Like I've had folks who've read my earlier books, who've done the program on their own, and their outcomes have been remarkable, right? They've come off of meds, they've shed diagnoses, and they've walked away from the system. And I never met them. I never talked to them. They didn't have a doctor. They didn't have a whole community of folks like cheering them on. And they walked through, this initiatory portal, through their own courageous efforts. What I find when it comes to how we identify our value and worth as women in society, and the habits that we have gotten into around the ways that we relate to partners, the way that we mother, and the ways that we orient towards our careers if we choose to have them. This is a lot of societal programming, right? And shame is an extension of society. The regulatory system of society is the, induction of shame in individuals, and tendency we have to value being seen as good and right. So one of the ways that we break the spell is to practice what I call wearing the villain crown. So we practice seeing ourselves through the eyes of someone who maybe judges us, but also we see ourselves through our own judgments of others, and we allow it to be possible that maybe we are this horrible thing, right? Maybe I am, the selfish, attention seeking, irresponsible, reckless mess. Or, maybe if I'm judging another woman as being, let's say, like, incompetent or slutty or whatever, the long list of judgments I might have
Can we call
rendered.
it our shadow side?
Exactly. So what would happen in that instance, like, let's say I pass a woman at the supermarket and I can't even, it just comes in, right? It just pops up in my mind. It's like, I can't believe she's wearing that. It's like,
Yeah.
just like, I can practically see her nipples. Like, what is she
Guilty as
doing?
charged.
We all are. I would argue we all are. So, and because it's a very fine-tuned social acceptance,
Yeah.
which equates to survival mechanism, right? So let's say that pops in my mind. I could just ignore it, right? I could go tell a friend like what happened and really start to gather energy around that judgment. Or I might take a minute or two when I get home and just sit with myself and consider the possibility that I don't have the permission to be, looking slutty in the grocery store with my nipples visible or whatever it might be. That I imagine that's the line, that if I were to cross that line somehow, some way, which I never would, of course, but if I were to, right, then I would be ruined and I would be discarded, right? So I don't have the permission, but I think we all deeply long for the permission to be loved no matter what, right? And to not have to curate and manage and perform. And you can start to reclaim these threads of permission through your own judgment of other women. And it becomes a way to meet the part of you that is cowering, imagining like, I hope I never am that. I hope I never do that. I hope I never show up that way because I would be canceled, right? Because I would be punished. And it's energetically expensive to maintain a lot of these, right? So to make sure I'm never seen as incompetent or lazy or selfish, right? It's a long list. And there's little parts of me that are charged with curating my presentation of who it is that I am to the world, and sometimes to different things. To do this villain crown practice entirely on your own without other women who are dedicated to taking uncomfortable levels of personal responsibility, to applying curiosity where it's so much easier to be defensive, and to resolve our finger pointing and blame reflexes, it's something your nervous system probably won't, and for good reason, allow you to do. So when you are in a space where women are committed, right, to these efforts and to this intention, and it really isn't honestly an effort, it's just a reframe. It's like a reframe in your life. That allows your system to feel enough of a sense of safety that you actually can prioritize these practices without defaulting to the, oh, it's not going to work for me, it's fine, it's other shit to do anyway, right? The way that we interfere with our own expansion, there are a lot of ways. I call it having this capacity, that we are just not ready to have the things on a nervous system level that we say that we want. And we can grow that capacity little by little, especially together with other women.
Can you give us an example of that, like where we don't feel like, where we're not ready to be something, or to become a kind of, to adopt a kind of trait that we want? Yeah.
Oh, I could give so many examples. I'll give two that are in the realm of like sexual expression and the reclamation of that kind of flirtatious, playful energy. Because for me, as like a pedigreed doctor who only spoke in a very curated and managed way, and who always wore, very conservative clothing publicly, and had like a bit of a split life, right? Where I had this avatar I showed up as in my professional life. And, and then I'm from New Jersey and would have like my trucker mouth and wear my booty shorts, like in my, personal life. I never thought that was a problem. I was just like, this is what you do, you perform. Yeah. And, I started in 2021 in the wake of a lot of the inner alchemy asked of me by my divorce. I was called to start. I've always loved dance, but I was called to start pole dancing, actually. And I had a friend, she invited me to a class, and I've never been particularly strong or particularly flexible. So it was not even remotely accessible to me. Like the first class, I was like, I can't even lift my body weight off the ground. And yet there was this yes inside of me that I chose to honor. And, within 2 months, I had a pole in my living room. And it has probably been the most spiritually expansive and mind, body, soul integrative practice I've ever done. So that's sort of the context. So I start, I have a teacher, and I start dancing every day, and I'm like training because I have this intrinsic motivation finally for the first time in my life to actually get stronger and more flexible. And it has nothing to do with health or, any externalized concepts of like why that might be a good idea for me. It's because I want it, right? So I'm dancing every day. And within, I would say, like 2 months, I injure my ribs, like my right ribs. Now, injuries are common, it's a very athletic kind of dance, and injuries are not uncommon. But I injured these ribs not once, but 3 times in a row. Cause like I would like try to get back to it and it'd be too early and I'd like hear a pop, and I was unable to, move for the following 2 months. So you could say, okay, that's just random. Oh, it sucks. You get injured, you start something new. Totally. I knew that I was like in many ways constraining myself and punishing myself because I had come out of a dynamic that did that for me. Right. So in my past relationship, there was a lot of that energy of constraining me. This is my narrative anyway, around my expression when it came to dance. And there was a lot of like, don't do that, don't post that, that kind of a thing. Right. So what happens when that's not there anymore? I did that for myself.
Yeah.
I did it for myself. Another example is that I was okay, so it's probably not surprising that a lot of the material that I share stems from my authority issues, right? So I've been working on these for many, many, many years. Yeah. So for somebody like me, when I get pulled over by a cop, also my dad, is in law enforcement. It's like this very activating, triggering, whatever. So I get pulled over while I'm driving and I'm going like a few miles over the speed limit. And I have this very righteous, I could argue with anybody and defend myself. And I've had this kind of like litigator in me that can come out very easily, as I was saying, to make my point, right, to anybody and everybody. And so the cop comes over to the window and I'm in my neighborhood. And he's like, I am so-and-so, and I work in this area, and, you were going over the speed limit. And I had a choice then, right? So again, I inserted in what otherwise might have been a reflexive, defensive, or something like that, reaction. And I've noticed this guy in my neighborhood because he's like super handsome. Okay. And I've noticed him many, many, many times more. So I decide, when he says I'm so-and-so, whatever, I work in this area. And I decided in that micro moment to say, oh, I know, I notice you every day. Right. So I was just like a little playful. Right. Yeah. And I did not get a ticket. Okay. I didn't get a ticket. He let me go. It's not like he asked me out. It was nothing like that. It was just like a little light interaction. And he decided to let me. So he lets me go. And I'm like, this has never happened before. Okay. So like I could argue my way out of things, but I have never played my way out of something that I didn't want. Within 5 minutes, 6 minutes, a huge, huge branch falls out of the sky onto my windshield and shatters my entire windshield, becomes like little bits of connected glass. Okay. I don't believe any longer in random accidents and random injuries. And again, this is another story where I could say, oh my God, that's crazy. A huge branch fell in my car. Like, what is that about? And then be like, oh, so annoying. Now I have to deal with this. Immediately, I knew that it was related to that experience, right? So like all of the programming, that inner slut shamer I have that says like, what did you just do? That was not appropriate, or whatever the hell that part says, that inner protector, that energy is a match for some kind of so-called punishment. Now, again, I like the conventional psychiatrist in me is like listening to this being like, that is magical thinking. That's crazy. And has nothing to do with you. But these days I will look at how I will constrain myself. And we do it through symptoms. We do it through illness. We do it through worrying. We do it through focusing on what is not wanted when we finally get what is wanted, because the experience of holding in our bodies that satisfaction, that pleasure, that excitement is very limited. It's literally minutes long before you might find yourself moving on to focus your attention on something other than this amazing thing that you just succeeded or in achieving or acquired or were gifted or whatever. And this is how we end up moving through most of our lives in a very narrow bandwidth of experience, avoiding what is extremely unwanted, but never really enjoying what it is that we say, we long for. And so exploring these subconscious constraints and making bringing awareness to the reasons that we might actually want to not have the things that we don't have. Like, what are we getting out of that? What might be the upside? I've had so many lessons in my business. I mean, I could write an entire book about it, especially in the past couple of years that I've been, single. My business has become like this spiritual charnel ground where I see all of my unconscious stuff, and I get to explore it, in this relatively safe container. But it's extraordinary, like what I say I want and what I actually am able to hold and have in terms of, let's say, leadership in my business, for example, are very different things. And again, when you're in a community of women where there's like, it's no shame, it's just interesting, all of this. You just bring it out into the open air much more quickly.
Right. I mean, that level of introspection can be hard sometimes because, we may not have that ability to kind of really understand what's going on within us because we're so close to it. So how did you begin to make sense of everything that was happening? Like, for instance, the sequence of events that were happening in your life that were kind of mirroring what was going on inside you and the constraints that you were still placing upon yourself. Like, what was that process like for you?
I think it starts with a commitment to what is, and I'm certainly not the first person to talk about this concept, but there's, again, a moment that you're ready to engage that. And the moment before, you're not ready. And I think a lot of it, again, my bias is that it has to do with nervous system regulation and getting this foundation of your literal physical body well set so that you can start to explore the possibility that as a woman, your relationship to desire can be so much more interesting than the two ways we normally relate to desire, which is, and interestingly, I don't know what I want. So most of us as women are walking around, and I'll certainly for myself, focused a lot on the aspects of our lives that are not as wanted, okay? Whether that's something present or something absent. And when we are asked to use our imaginal skills and gifts to realm into possibilities of what we do want, if there were no constraints, it's actually really, really challenging, right? Like, what actually do you want your life to look like? Because we're so energetically tied to resisting and fighting with what is. And again, for very good reason. There's no mistakes here. There's no problems, right? Like, we're not doing it wrong. It's just a matter of this moment of maturation where it becomes more compelling to meaning make, and to apply curiosity to what is so that we can start to develop intimacy with our lived reality. And maybe even ultimately, this concept of there being a guide, right? God, there being an energy that's got you, right? Like, how do you trust your story? I've come farther onto the spectrum of really feeling into the possibility that my entire life is already written. And I like playing with that because it allows me to just take a comfy seat, in the theater and watch the damn movie rather than imagining that it's my role to direct the characters as if they're going to, change on the screen before me. And all of this wasted energy. And it's not wasted in the sense that that's like a wrong thing to do. It's just that at a certain point you love alive in your body so much that you are unwilling to donate it unconsciously to these struggles. And that is to recognize that the struggles also give us aliveness, right? So, when I choose not to retaliate right? And give my energy to something, I am feeling a little taste in my upset of how much energy my body has. Maybe before an incident happened, I was like kind of a bit numb, right?
Mhm.
I have watched myself and a lot of the women I work with toggle between numbness and overwhelm, right? This kind of what is called in neurophysiology like a functional freeze, where you are, CEOing in the daytime, and then you literally can only lay still on a couch and Netflix and scroll in the rest of your life because that vigilance has translated into functionality, but there is a disconnect. There is a way that you are not able to actually offer your attention to your own body. And so
Mhm.
what I found is a lot of the conflicts and struggles and unwanted things in my life, they feel in my body the same way that excitement does. Like it's enlivening, right?
Right.
And when you watch your upset, you'll learn that. You will
Yeah.
learn that the unwanted email is really similar to like locking eyes with the super handsome guy, walking down the street. This somatic sequence is similar. The narration, of course,
Mhm.
is different. And so you start to recognize that you can engage aliveness in your body in many different ways. And you might
Yeah.
find that dance and movement or creative expression or,
Yeah.
making a video and sharing it from your heart, on social media, who knows? Having your friends over, for a
Yeah.
potluck, you will find that there are ways to access this aliveness that are really that render the struggle model
Mhm.
just kind of like not compelling any
Yeah.
longer. I'll just say, one of the most challenging aspects of this is translating that into your relationships with other women, or people, I guess, in general, so that you are not connecting through commiseration and complaint,
Yeah.
because it's what
That's really
we
important.
do.
Yeah.
It's what we do.
Yeah.
For me, that was a very actually challenging transition
Yeah.
because I felt like, well, all right, like what? I'm not going to be interesting if I don't have my crazy stories about all the shit that's happened, to
Yeah.
me, tell my friends. Like, what am I just gonna like talk about the amazing stuff? That's it. Feel connected to me. And a lot of the like I have very self-deprecating humor, like in my personal relationships. And
Yeah.
um I got to this place where I was like, I'm complete with that approach, right? And what that meant for me was like that I would worry, I'm not funny, I'm not interesting, I'm not special, I'm not relatable. And, if I'm meeting somebody new and I choose to keep my humor in the non-self-deprecating realm, I'm not smalling myself, I'm not making myself accessible, I'm not doing that thing that a lot of us do.
Yeah.
If I compliment your dress and you tell me you got it on the sale rack, to secure connection in violation of our own greatness, of our own grandeur, of our own expansive presence. And these habits die hard. And again, when you have accountability partners, it's just a different lifestyle. It just becomes a different way of being.
Great. Kelly, thank you for giving us permission to do that and to kind of liberate ourselves from all those messages that we've been receiving all these years. I mean, your book is just brilliant. I mean, I just want to let everyone know we just scratched the surface here. You got to get the book, Kelly Brogan's book, The Reclaimed Woman, Love Your Shadow, Embody Your Feminine Gifts, Experience the Specific Pleasure of Who You Are. You can find it wherever books are sold and on Kelly's website, kellybroganmd.com. The link will be in the description.